Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video on the channel. And today, I'm going to take a look at two of the new fusion rifles introduced to Destiny 2 in Season of the Splicer, the Null Composure and the PLUG ONE.1, as well as give my thoughts on which of these two I think is better. Before we begin, if you like what you see here, feel free to leave a like, as well as click the subscribe button and the bell icon next to that to receive notifications for whenever I make a new video. On top of all that, I stream Destiny 2 fairly often over on my Twitch channel, which is also going to be linked in this video's description. But let's get into it. I've seen plenty of posts and videos over the last 2 days calling these fusion rifles the Loaded Question 2.0, but they each have different stats and perks, so which of these two fusion rifles is truly the heir to Loaded Question's legacy? I'll start to answer that by looking at both of these fusion rifles, as well as the methods for obtaining each. The Null Composure is Season 14's ritual weapon, meaning it's obtained from completing a quest called A Sacred Fusion, obtained from Banshee 44. This quest is relatively simple, just involving getting kills with solar damage, disintegrations, or fusion rifles in the Crucible, Gambit, or Strike playlists, as well as completing some of these ritual playlist activities. Bonus progress is granted for using a stasis subclass, and it's not a long quest, only taking a couple hours worth of playtime to complete. The other fusion returning is a weapon from Destiny 1, the PLUG ONE.1, and it drops from Nightfall strikes whenever it's available in the 3-week rotation. It is dropping from this week's Nightfall, which is going to be the Glassway on Europa. Both of these fusion rifles can get the perk Reservoir Burst, which was originally the pinnacle perk on the Loaded Question fusion rifle from Black Armory, which has now been sunset. Fusions aren't currently great for PvE content, but Reservoir Burst certainly helps both of these fusions to be much better than they'd otherwise be. Reservoir Burst, for anyone who doesn't remember, makes a fusion rifle deal additional damage and causes targets to explode on death as long as the fusion rifle has a full battery. Reservoir Burst's damage bonus is currently 25%, down from 33% when it was originally released on Loaded Question during Black Armory. Null Composure is a void damage rapid fire frame fusion with Feeding Frenzy and Heating Up in the first column, and Reservoir Burst and High Impact Reserves in the second column. For PvE, sticking with Feeding Frenzy and Reservoir Burst is going to be the optimal use for this weapon. Null Composure, like all fusion rifles, fires 7 bolts, which with Reservoir Burst active will hit Carl in the Lost Sector on Nessus for 5,235 damage each, for a total output of 36,645 damage on Carl with a major spec mod equipped. When landing an explosion on Carl by killing one of the adds near him, we get a damage value of 14,087 for the explosion. It should be noted that the Reservoir Burst explosion has a fair degree of damage fall off, but the numbers here I'm pretty sure are going to be the maximum possible damage from Reservoir Burst's explosion for each rifle. Overall, I think Null Composure is a very solid fusion rifle, and it certainly has the advantage of being easier to obtain with the right roll since it is a static rolled ritual weapon. Let's take a closer look to PLUG ONE though, since there's more to be said about that fusion rifle compared to Null Composure, since PLUG ONE comes with random rolls. PLUG ONE is a precision frame fusion rifle that deals arc damage. The roll that I landed came with Reservoir Burst and Heating Up, which gives increased accuracy and vertical stability after a kill. This effect does stack. PLUG ONE with Reservoir Burst active will deal 5,788 damage on each of its 7 bolts for a total of 40,516 damage on Carl with a major spec mod equipped. The explosions from PLUG ONE also seemed a little stronger than Null Composure's in testing, being able to hit for 16,913 on Carl. Before I move on to the comparison between these two fusion rifles, I would also like to point out that at this time, PLUG ONE has a unique perk called Cornered, which acts similarly to Surrounded for a fusion rifle, buffing charge time when surrounded. I do not yet have one of these rifles with Cornered, and it is also a second column perk, meaning that you cannot get both Cornered and Reservoir Burst on the same roll. However, Cornered is currently unique to this weapon and may be worth a try if you manage to land a roll with that perk. However, I personally think that Reservoir Burst, at least at this time, is better than Cornered. The other thing to note before I start comparing the two fusion rifles is that they both exhibit a similar playstyle where you're going to want to spam the first shot on the battery before reloading and firing again, making sure that every shot you fire is able to take advantage of Reservoir Burst's bonus, since you'll lose the buff as soon as you don't have a full battery anymore. So, with all that said, which of these two fusions is better? For a TLDR, PLUG ONE is going to be the better of the two for PvE, but if you want to see the reasoning by that conclusion, stick around. The first advantage that PLUG ONE has over the Null Composure is going to be its archetype. Null Composure is a rapid fire frame fusion, so it has the worst impact out of the two. Its impact stat is 55. The Plug 1 is a precision frame, however, so it has a base impact stat of 80, which is reflected in its damage test against Carl, presenting a higher number than Null Composure. However, another advantage of Plug 1's random rolls is that it can roll with a battery perk in its second column, and some of these battery perks affect impact. Null Composure, on the other hand, cannot get a battery perk since it is a static rolled weapon. Not all of these battery perks are beneficial, however, such as Accelerated Coils, which will reduce the impact of the Plug 1 to 75, but another battery option, Liquid Coils, will increase it to 85, further increasing the damage of Plug 1. It will, however, increase the amount of time required to charge the weapon, but I say that's a fair trade-off for more damage, seeing as you're using this as more of a special utility weapon than something you want to fire as many times as possible. Another potential downside of the Plug 1 is the fact that it can roll with a charge time masterwork, which on fusion rifles will increase the charge time, but it will also slightly decrease the weapon's impact when you do the masterwork. However, due to the inherent difference in damage, I'm much more likely to pick Plug 1 over Null Composure, even with the negatives that can come with random rolls. When comparing magazines on Reservoir Burst fusions, however, it is also going to be ideal to have a smaller magazine, since you want to always be able to have a full battery, and reloading after the first shot when you have a smaller battery lets you load more of your ammo in reserve, and so you'll be able to pull off more Reservoir Burst shots than on a fusion rifle that has a larger magazine. In this case, however, it does seem to be a tie despite the magazine size difference, since even though Plug 1 has a slightly smaller battery, Null Composure's rapid-fire frame allows it to intrinsically hold deeper reserves, somewhat counterbalancing the problem of its magazine size. However, Plug 1 also does have a very noticeable range advantage over Null Composure, and while it can be less apparent than others mentioned due to the barrels and battery options being able to affect Plug 1's range, the range masterwork on Null Composure is mainly what brings it to a range stat of 54, keeping it competitive with Plug 1's base of 62. Although, Plug 1 can roll a range masterwork, and it can get a range stat between 70 and 87, depending on what barrel your Plug 1 has. And in that case, the range category will then become very much more in favor of Plug 1 compared to Null Composure. All in all, however, Null Composure feels very strong in its own right, but at times it felt like it struggled to get the kills needed to activate Reservoir Burst's explosions. Plug 1 didn't hit quite the same damage as Loaded Question used to, but that can be attributed to the fact that precision fusions like Plug 1 are not quite as strong as high-impact fusions like Loaded Question, on top of the nerf that Bungie gave to Reservoir Burst in Season 14, reducing the damage bonus from 33% to 25%. Although, if I did have to call one of these fusion rifles the Loaded Question 2.0, it would for sure be Plug 1, since it feels a lot more like Loaded Question than Null Composure does, simply due to its superior stats. Null Composure, in my opinion, fails to compete with weapons like Salvager's Salvo as an explosive weapon, but at least Plug 1 is able to provide a similar utility for a different purpose. Salvo is a lot more useful for enemies further away, while Plug 1 provides a safe, close quarters explosive option since you cannot damage yourself with Reservoir Burst's explosion. As one last advantage for Null Composure, however, is the fact that you don't have to worry about random rolls, and you can still get a very strong weapon out of its quest, which only again requires a couple hours of playtime. Null Composure is not bad by any means, but Plug 1 simply does a better job of filling the void left after Loaded Question was sunset. On top of all that, as a side note, I know the Adept version is not available yet, but later in the season, an Adept version of Plug 1 will be available, which will be able to slot the Adept mods, further increasing the gap between these two weapons. That's all from me for this video, however, and if you liked what you saw, remember a like and subscribe is always appreciated, and if you want to see more of the runs of Destiny 2 content live, including the upcoming Vault of Glass race on May 22nd, remember to check out my Twitch channel, which I'll link down below, and this has been Kazungu, and I'll see y'all in the next one.